Hello, my friends. So today I'm here with this beautiful specimen here. So this is a MacBook Air, the original one was late 2011, if I'm not mistaken. This is the A1370 model. And it was a pretty decent machine. It wasn't amazing or anything like that. I bought it, it's mine from new, basically. And originally, it had a dual core. What is the actual terminology for that? I think it's a dual core, Intel dual core, or Core 2 Duo. Yeah, something like that. Core 2 Duo. Don't remember exactly the clock, but and had like a 2 gig of RAM. So not very capable for today's standards, but nevertheless like a decent machine. And what I did is I allow my kids to use it as their gaming sort of laptop. So whenever we went to visit friends and things like that, they took this with them and played games and things like that. So it was working fine for that purpose, and it was in a very good condition, really good. Everything was working, everything was fine until I decided to let the kids use it. Of course, it's always like that, isn't it? So what happened was eventually the screen got smashed, really smashed. So it was beyond any reparation, unfortunately. And that really saddened me a lot, specifically because I collect a lot of Macs. And this one here was already like something that has some meaning to me, and having had this one here trashed was not an option. So I put this away for a long time, and I was every day looking at eBay to see if I could find the screen that will fit this particular model here. There were a lot of offerings at eBay, but the prices were ridiculous. Like a single screen was going for sometimes more than £100 and things like that, and the condition wasn't that great either, like a lot of dents and marks and things like that. So of course I didn't go for them until a month ago, more or less, where I found an offer for a working screen that would fit this particular model here. And the condition of the screen was pretty much perfect, like no dents or marks or anything like that. This is the screen, the one that you are seeing right now. So everything's perfect. It's really almost like new. There are no marks whatsoever on the screen assembly. The screen itself looks great. And so yeah, I went for it. I think I paid like 35 quid for the screen. Very good price, very fair price for it. And then I ran into some issues when reassembling everything. Problem was the screen was actually a fit to this model here, but it was meant to be used in the late 2012 A1370 model, which was different because the main board was no longer like the Core 2 Duo, but rather an Intel i5 processor, and the layout of the board is slightly different, which means the Wi-Fi antenna basically it was placed a little bit more into the middle of the board here, whereas the Core 2 Duo, the assembly, basically the antenna was here, basically what this means is the antenna cable, which is coming from the screen, was basically too short to fit the new the setting that I had here. So I couldn't do it, basically. I couldn't fit the antenna cable into the board. So eventually I end up like replacing the whole logic board. So even though it was working, the original one, I chose to replace it to bring this up to a more usable way, operational mode anyways. So I replaced it with a more recent version. So the main board is i5, I don't remember again the clock, but it was fairly decent, and it has 4 gig of RAM, which basically means that this is a fairly capable laptop even for nowadays standards. So it's running High Sierra operating system, which is not the latest, of course. It's quite old, but still, as I said, enough for pretty much all day-to-day activities. So going to the internet, YouTube works just fine. word processing and Excel and pretty much anything that I need for. It's working really, really good, really well. So I'm actually using this a lot now, a lot. I almost like adopted it as my day-to-day laptop, even though I have like some Windows PC laptops that are way faster than this one, but this one is now my preferred one, and for a number of reasons. So let me show you something about this guy here. So let me adjust the camera here so you guys can actually see the screen, right? There you go. There. That's basically screen, right? It doesn't look too bright just because the brightness is actually set to low. So this is basically the maximum brightness that the screen can produce, which is again really good. It's really good. The screen is perfect. It's almost like a brand new screen. So let me log in. Right, so that's basically the desktop. This is High Sierra, as I mentioned before. Wi-Fi is working just fine. Bluetooth is working just fine as well. If we look at the specs of the machine, if we go to the About This Mac here, and if you go to the configuration, so I'm not sure if this is readable, but it's a High Sierra, right? So 10.13.6. This is a mid 2011 actually version of the board. So the one that actually got replaced was it was a late 2010 actually, and this one is a mid 2011. So both are compatible with the A1370 MacBook Air model, right? And so the processor on this one is a 1.6 gigahertz Intel Core i5. So this is probably like first or second generation of the processor, so quite old, but still very functional. And 4 gigs of RAM, operating at 1333 megahertz DDR3. And it has an Intel HD graphics built into the board as well. Right, so again, nothing too shabby here. Storage was also updated. So I basically acquired a new flash drive for this Mac. So it's now operating at 192 gigabytes, so plenty of disk space as well. And I do have a partition that runs Windows 8, which is the latest version compatible with this version of Boot Camp. So it's working perfectly fine as well. So I can boot directly into Windows here if I need to use this machine for Windows purposes and things like that, right? I replaced the keyboard as well. So the keyboard now has the backlit option. So I can basically use this on the dark. The original one didn't have that. So as you can see, basically I replaced everything, and the battery as well. So there is a new battery here. As you can see, it's holding charge amazingly well. So it holds the charge for maybe 8 hours or so, even more, depending on the usage. Yeah, again, like the only thing that is original from my original laptop here really is the main assembly. Everything else was replaced. Even the trackpad, I need to replace that as well, because when you replace the keyboard, the trackpad basically needs replacement as well. Otherwise, you cannot control the backlit and things like that, because the keyboard connects to the trackpad. All in all, like, it was actually very cheap. The keyboard, I bought it for I think 10 quid, brand new, coming from China, of course, but it works perfectly well. The trackpad, same thing, like I think it was like £8 for the trackpad, also brand new, coming from China, works perfectly well. The new board, it cost me like 50 quid, fairly decent price actually for the board, considering everything. And what else? The battery, another 50 quid. It's a brand new battery coming from Duracell, so it is quite expensive. So all in all, reassembling the whole thing here cost me almost the same as buying a used one in working condition from the same era. The difference is the quality of the build. So here is almost like a brand new laptop. There are no marks, there is nothing. It's really like it just came out of the box. And if you go and purchase a used one on eBay, for example, it's going to be very hard to find a decent one. Most of them will have dents on the sides here because people just drop those notebooks. They don't really take good care of them most of the time. Those are mobile sort of computers, so people are basically taking them on airplanes and pretty much everywhere. And yeah, it's a lot of damage most of the time. So I'm very happy with this build here. Really, really happy. As I said, I'm using this a lot. And one of the things that I like the most about this is this little guy here. So this is an application that is called Chip Shaver. This is a classic OS emulator, and probably you guys heard about it, some of you at least, right? And I used this before in other computers, so this also has a Windows version for it. The problem I had in the past was the mouse, or the cursor, the mouse cursor, was lagging way too much. So you moved it and it was not very consistent. It was very awkward actually. So not very pleasant to use. When I installed this here, I had the same issue, exactly the same issue. And I found out after a lot of research that it was just a matter of adjusting some settings on Chip Shaver and everything basically came back to life exactly the way it should. So let me show you how this is working now. So I start the application here. I'm operating that in full screen mode, right? So it's booting up OS 9, which is the one that is best suited for this version of Chip Shaver that I'm using here. The booting process is incredibly fast. When it actually picks up, it boots incredibly fast, right? And then you have a classic macOS 9 running here. The great thing about Chip Shaver is it uses the network connectivity that you have already in your main machine. So you don't have to configure anything extra. It just picks that up and uses it. So which means this guy is connected to the internet. So I have basically a classic OS Macintosh here, laptop, in a very nice form factor. And I can run pretty much all the old games and things like that. So I have my games folder here open already. So I have tested a lot of them. They work perfectly well. So Oregon Trail, a very classic option, right? And it works just fine. Of course, like the window is very small because I'm using here a very high resolution setting, but you can change that, of course, right? So yeah, I'm really happy with this setup here. I can even use, I don't know if you guys used to use, for example, Hotline, which was like kind of like a peer-to-peer client server sort of thing back in the days, like in the 90s, late 90s. And it was how we used to get software and hacks right after the BBSs, right? And I installed it here, and incredibly enough, basically I found out that there are some active servers still. So this is basically Hotline connected to one of those Hotline servers. And if I go here to, for example, files, right? And there is basically, I can download a whole bunch of stuff here, right? Of course, there are other ways to download software. So you can go to Macintosh repository, for example, download software directly from it. But it is so much fun, you know, to use those old kind of software here, and it just works. So the other thing that I found out is that there is a Node BBS client called First Class, which I used a lot back in the days as well. So I installed it and I realized that that also works, and there is at least one BBS that is still operational. Let me see if I can find that. I mean the First Class client. I think it should be here over internet. And First Class client and First Class. And then here I have a bookmarked already like Vintage Mac, which is that server that I mentioned. So I don't think you have to log in, as far as I remember at least. Right, so yeah, it asks you to register. And yeah, it basically is requesting me to log in, and I don't remember basically my ID here. I did register, and I basically I need to remind myself what I did here so I can log into this BBS, but it does work perfectly fine, and that really amazed me. So yeah, it's a very good way for you guys to have like this retro experience with maybe a more modern setup, right? So it runs again on Windows as well. There is a version of Windows or ShipShaver that you guys can install. It requires some settings and tweakings to get this working perfectly fine, but it is totally worth it. It's very responsive, very fast. It is so fast that some games, for example, they don't work really well because they are way too much accelerated. But overall, it works really, really well. Another thing that ShipShaver basically provides for is, you see that there is here another hard drive. This is my main hard drive, right? So this is actually a disk image that is being, it was created under the High Sierra operating system, and it's used by this emulator. But ShipShaver also creates another disk here, which is called basically Unix. And what this is, in fact, is just a shared folder in High Sierra. So basically you can go to High Sierra, you can download whatever it is that you want, you can dump it into the High Sierra shared folder, and it will appear in this Unix drive that you see here. So it is really, really nice and very easy to use. So to interchange files between the two operating systems, it goes like a breeze. It is so easy, right? So yeah, it's really nice. So browser-wise, so I'm using ClassZilla here because it's the only one that actually works with classic OS. Not really works 100% because modern websites will use like SSL, for example, in a version that is not compatible with older browsers. And even though ClassZilla is kind of like a newer interpretation of older browsers, still have some issues like with SSL negotiation and things like that. But there are some websites that works just fine. And one of them being the old Macintosh repository, the old Mac archive of software. So it works fine because it doesn't use SSL, so it's plain HTTP. It tells you that here. It detects that you're using an old operating system, in this case macOS 9, and it disables SSL so that you don't have any conflicts or anything like that. So from here you can download pretty much anything that you want for classic OS games and utilities applications directly from your browser into your newer operating system, right? So yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. So let me just quit the applications here. So I think I still have Hotline. Oh, this is first class. Let me just quit first class as well, right? And then to shut down, just shut it down. And it basically goes back to High Sierra. It's as transparent as that. Very efficient, as you guys can see, right? So that's the shared folder that I mentioned. So if you basically dump anything in this folder here in High Sierra, anything that you put here is going to be appearing in that Unix drive on the ShipShaver's classic OS 9. So it's very easy to interchange files. And the other thing that I wanted to show you that has nothing to do with ShipShaver is the ScumVM. So ScumVM is also like a way for you to run classic games that are not only designed for Macintosh, but some other operating systems as well, that normally will not run in modern hardware. So for example, let me start it up here. This also has versions for Windows and others if you never heard about it. So I have here, for example, the Dig. I have Mist, right, which is a very, I think everybody here knows what Mist is, right? So I have Goblins and Secret of Monkey Island and others. So I love, for example, the Dig. It's a game that really marked me, back in the days. I used to love play it, and also like Full Throttle. Those LucasArts sort of games are always like the best one. I really like the Dig because of the story behind it. So the Dig was supposed to be a movie, actually. The story is so good, and it's actually Steven Spielberg that came up with what was it called? The screenwriting for it, right? So the whole story, it was created by Steven Spielberg back in the days. And the idea was to make a movie out of it. But at the time, technology didn't exist to actually create a movie and like that in those terms, right? And it was going to be so expensive to actually run a movie like that they just basically put the project in the drawer. And then someone basically said, okay, so why instead of making a movie, we don't make a game. And the Dig actually was born like that. It was supposed to be a movie, and because of budget restrictions, they made it up to a game. And that was great because the Dig is such a nice game, right? So that's basically the game running. Again, you can run it in full screen if you want, right? But audio, let's just... So I love the way that the story is told here, the animations. It's really something that will keep you looking at the screen and you want to see what's going on. So it's really a game for you guys to try it out if you never heard about it. The Dig is amazing, really amazing. Has a lot of puzzles and well, it's something for you guys to try to experiment. I cannot really tell you what the experience of playing this is if you never played it. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you guys. So an amazing piece of machine, right? It works amazingly well. I have installed a whole bunch of stuff here, as you guys can see. Everything works just fine. Like the browser, for example, running Safari here, as I said, it works really well. Like even YouTube, if you go to YouTube, for example, like just loads up very fast. And wow, it's a very, very usable computer. So I love it, right? I'm scrolling very smooth, as you guys can see, and blah, 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 right? Very nice piece of machinery. That's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. I certainly did when rebuilding this one. And so that was another project that I did and came out really, really nice, right? So I will talk about other stuff later on. Cheers, guys.